Hello, fellow fight fans, and welcome to the Untitled Fightcast number 016. I'm your host, Zephyr Corvo, and thankfully, the MMA world is continuing to give us stuff to talk about, and this week is actually not terrible news. So, with that being said, wrap up, lock in, and let's get it started. So, UFC 249 is apparently, big air quotes on apparently, scheduled to be on for May 9th. But again, with everything going on, we will see about that. It could very easily get postponed yet again. The location is to be announced. And also, speaking of 249, this past Friday, which would be April 17th, before the date that it was supposed to take place on, April 18th, Tony actually made weight just to prove he could do it. And apparently, according to Daniel Cormier in a recent DC and Helwani episode, DC said that this will actually make cutting weight for May 9th a little bit easier for Tony because when he goes back up in weight, he won't go back up as far as where he was before. And so he'll actually have to cut less weight between now and May 9th. And so hopefully that will have a positive impact on the weight cut and Tony's performance. But for the most part, Tony just did it to prove to all of us that he could do it because he's a badass and has the mental fortitude of something I can't even compare it to right now because he's just a beautiful, crazy man. But also, in terms of the May 9th card, Amanda Nunes has pulled out of her title defense against Felicia Spencer, citing that not only during this crazy time of the corona pandemic that she's not having the proper training, but also that it's not the amount of time for training that she would necessarily like. So that only leaves us 2 title bouts on May 9th, which would be the interim title bout, the main event between Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje, and then the co-main event, which would be the title defense for Henry Cejudo against Dominic Cruz, which apparently has been finalized. And also, personally, one of my favorite announcements of the past week is that Bryce Mitchell will, in fact, be on this card if it happens, and it will apparently be against Charles Rosa, who is a very good fighter. I've only done a little bit of research. I didn't have enough time to do all the research I would have liked to get this out on time, but certainly it's not going to be an easy task for Bryce. Charles being a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and of course, as we know, Bryce has amazing submissions himself, so it could be a ground battle, but it could also be a stand-up fight, so who knows? Also, we did have a UFC fighter test positive for COVID-19, and that was Lyman Good, but he has also recovered and said he's at 100%, so there's that. Outside of UFC news, Bellator has announced that Bellator 244, that was supposed to take place on June 6th in Chicago, has been postponed due to the ongoing worldwide situation. And the PFL, the Professional Fighters League, has postponed its entire 2020 season and will not return until 2021. They will, however, be providing a monthly cash stipend for all of its fighters, and that's simply amazing. Big gold star, 2 thumbs up to the PFL. I mean that's to pay the fighters for an entire year. Well, maybe not an entire year. We're in April, so to be able to pay their entire roster for 8 months, still, I mean that's quite a long time. Almost 3/4 of a year. That's super commendable. But in light of the season cancellation, the CEO of the PFL, Peter Murray, said in an interview with Fox that they will be providing ESPN with, and I quote, original programming to maintain the brand's visibility and give fans access to the fighters and their stories. So I'm very interested to see what this original content is going to look like. Is it going to be documenting the fighters throughout the year as they deal with the COVID situation? Is it going to go more into their backstories? I mean, I could speculate for days on what this would be, but I'm very, very excited to see what this content is going to be. And overall, MMA in one way or another is continuing to push forward. So all in all, I'd say that this has been a much more positive week for MMA, at least more than the last few, although that's a pretty low bar to set. Fingers crossed, but keeping my personal hopes at zero because that's the only way to not get let down in life. But one last thing I did want to say before closing the show is about UFC 249, and that being that Dana White and the UFC are doing every single thing possible that they can do within their power that is feasible under the current understanding of the laws of the universe, and yet UFC 249 did not get put on April 18th because of ESPN and Disney. Now, if those two companies continue to not feel comfortable putting on sporting events, especially MMA, come May 9th, perhaps Dana can overcome this obstacle and pull off the last of a series of impossible feats, and that would be to convince ESPN to let the UFC stream their events on Fight Pass, which is what they did prior to signing with ESPN. I think if Dana can convince them in the sense of, hey, you guys don't feel comfortable with this, and I respect that, but we have fighters we need to pay, we have lots of staff members we need to pay, because the UFC hasn't laid anyone off, maybe ESPN will let them do that. But the UFC also has a contractual obligation to put on a certain number of events. It's either 40 or 42, somewhere around there. So when the UFC is back on ESPN, we might just get a whole lot of events coming our way, maybe even to a week. So again, keeping my hopes at zero, but still the fingers are crossed. Anyways, thank you so much as always for the continued support and for tuning in. It means the absolute world to me. This has been Zephyr Corvo for the Untitled Fightcast, and I will talk to y'all in next week's episode.